Welcome to Imperfect in an Uncertain World, Resources for Living with Authenticity and Purpose. Today, I want to talk about a word that keeps popping up, and that word is enemy. It shows up on my Facebook, in conversations, um, it shows up in my emails. But what is the enemy? I'm going to give you some of my thoughts. Now, I'm going to admit that the word enemy makes me really nervous. I can admit I've got people in my life that I've perceived to be antagonistic and seeking to cause me harm or hurt. And that's the definition of an enemy. But I ask myself, can I really know the motives of that person? And I wonder if those people are truly the enemy or if there was something deeper, something more insidious festering inside of them that just came out sideways at me and caused that reaction. Now, I believe it was probably the latter. A comment that was said to me earlier this week really triggered a reawakening in me and had me really begin to think about that whole enemy thing and deeply reflect on it. I was reminded that our actions are based upon our beliefs, our judgments, and our assumptions. Now, unaware, we get tangled in those assumptions and judgments. We react. Then someone we have labeled as an enemy reacts to our reaction, or vice versa, we react to their reaction. And as this cycle continues, the tangle gets tighter, more knotted, and we no longer see the other person as a person. Instead, we other them. And it's easy to see a other as an enemy. They really have not, they're no longer human to us. Now, for me, the enemy really isn't the person. I think the enemy is ignorance. And so I'm sure that we can all admit to being ignorant at least a time or two, because ignorance really manifests in reactions that come from a lack of knowledge, education, or awareness. And honestly, we all find ourselves there at some point. But what I've given you so far is just an intellectualization. How can we move what we know into our hearts so we can affect change in our life? Let's dive into the reality, the lived experience of the enemy called ignorance. Now, I want you to recall a time when someone disagreed with you or when you disagreed with them. A time when their views or beliefs resulted in actions that were harmful or hurtful. Now, let's reframe the situation. Let's no longer see the person as the enemy. The actions that stem from their ignorance is the enemy. And the root cause of their behavior is the enemy too. So now if you're like me, being proactive and liking to debate, you may give them a whole barrage of information in an effort to get them to change their mind. You may also point out the inconsistencies in their beliefs. You give them facts about why you're right and why they're wrong. Does it work? Maybe. Probably not. What often happens is that the conversation either devolves or ends abruptly. So you know what the problem is. What do you do next? How do you approach the so-called enemy? I believe that it's all within. If you want to be the change, as Gandhi says, you have to be the change. You change within. And so one of the best questions that I ask myself is, why do I believe what I believe? And then I really dig into the answer. I do a lot of reflection, a lot of introspection. And that's what I would suggest that you do too, that you do the same thing, that you really dig into all of this. Because when we are each actively engaged in uncovering the answer, we find that solid belief that is the foundation of who we are, the foundation of our authentic being. Now, but there are other times, and I will tell you there are a lot of other times if we're honest with ourselves, when I'm knee deep in the I don't know that I don't know, because we've all been there before, and answering that question, why do I believe what I believe, you're going to discover a lot of things you don't know. We discover minute cracks in that foundation. And this recognition presents an opportunity. We can evaluate the belief, to reform the belief, to change it, reframe it, or toss it out. During this process, we remember that the purpose of this life really is to gain wisdom while evolving into our truest self. We can't do that without going through or going down a rabbit hole or two. But this work is the internal work. Once we do that work and we pull ourselves out of that rabbit hole, we go to the external where we identify our so-called enemy and decide, how can I respond instead of react to it or to the situation? So I'm going to say, in what ways did you identify the enemy? How did you identify with the enemy? Did you get into a heated discussion about who was right and who was wrong? Um, and if you did, how easy was it for you to slip down that rabbit hole into the land of futility? But if you can reframe the situation, instead of seeing the person as the enemy, look at the ignorance or conditioning that created their belief system. That is truly the enemy. You can't fight against a person who has been conditioned to believe in a certain way that is harmful or hurtful to other people. So then I will ask you, how might you raise awareness of how these beliefs and lack of awareness and understanding are the suffering producers? Reframing the enemy to a producer of suffering is huge. Reframing ignorance to a producer of suffering is huge. It's the initial phase of a response that countermands ignorance. So, how do we continue to respond to ignorance with wisdom? So, when someone calls you a name, don't react. Um, Take action in ways that are not violent. As an example, I once had someone call me a name when I was working, and it was a pretty violent name. And instead of reacting or addressing the slur, I just got on my walkie and called for security. Didn't even attempt to argue with the woman who was telling me what an effing idiot I was. So a lot of times is, if you don't give energy to that person, they won't have power anymore. Some people live off your anger. So it is very important for you to remain neutral in situations like that. So practice nonviolence. Become what I call a blank wall when being insulted, or when you're in a situation where there's a lot of anger. Take yourself out of the situation. Remember that you need to breathe. And then remove yourself physically if necessary. Know that you don't need to be in a situation that you don't need to be in. Find ways to subtly educate. Take opportunities to use examples that make the suffering inherent in a belief. So maybe there were ways when I was having a discussion with someone who was adamant about what they really wanted, and then when I showed them some of the inconsistencies, they got angry. Maybe there are ways to educate, to really learn how the person is going to accept what you're sharing with them. And for an example is, I knew someone who really, really liked and really believed in right to work. She didn't see how the negative aspects of it. And so she had a boyfriend who was over the age of 60. And he had always worked in a union shop. And the shop one day just asked him, you've got seniority. Would you be willing to take extra time off over the holidays? And we'll call you back whenever we have more work. And he said, sure. He went home. They never called him back. They never had the extra work for him. And so when I shared to her that if he hadn't been working in a right to work state, he would have had more rights, she got very angry with me because she didn't want to see the fissure in her belief. But I ask myself, how might I have approached that in a different way that she might have seen where the inconsistencies were, or some of the negatives to what she would believe. So, repair the fissures in any social control systems or work to create new systems. Be a part of community. And this is a tough part. This is where you're called to be active, that you're going to be an activist. Um, Go out there and see what's wrong and be the change. Be the person. Don't just complain about it. Be the person that works to provide change, provide support to disenfranchise. Just get out there. Vote. Enough said on that one. Now, no matter what, do not let yourself be gaslighted. Reflect upon the words and actions of another. You don't have to accept another's view as your own. So, I would just like to end by saying that no, whatever you do, when you look past the superficiality of naming a person or a group as an enemy and dig deeper into the ignorance that is the enemy, you will be given the strength, the energy, the determination to battle the enemy with awareness. And through your awareness, you change the world by changing yourself. And through this awareness, you will draw people to you that will help you, that will form a community to help you change the world. I want to thank you for listening to this. I'd really like to know what you think of the enemy and who the enemy is, and how you take strides to actually confront the enemy compassionately. So if you like this video, give it 2 thumbs up. There are additional resources available at vanessafhurst.com. I am an intuitive mentor, would love to work with you to help you come to a place of understanding. But if you do nothing else today, really look deep within yourself and ask yourself how you know what you know and who the enemy is. Thank you.